What is fermentation, if not history?
What? Oh, uh-huh. Um, oh, it's that. My name's Will, and this is Will to Read. Today, we're going to be wrapping up September, but before we get to that, we must first give a moment of silence to the books that I didn't finish. The Vegetarian by Han Kang. And that's it. Yeah, that one really bugs me because I started off really strong. Like I read the first section in a day, but I don't know. I guess I got busy and just got put off to the side. And yeah. But anyway, let's get to the books I did finish. The first book I finished this month was one of two I had to read for a class, and it was Empire of Cotton: A Global History by Sven Beckert. I apologize ahead of time if this gets a bit too inside baseball. Beckert's thesis is basically that the world we live in, economically speaking at least, is because of the cotton industry. This book is very okay. It's written pretty accessibly, and I could see someone not trained in historical research getting a lot out of it. However, I will say, as someone currently doing a master's in history, this book is a bit of a mixed bag. I admire Beckert for his boldness in trying to take on the monumental task of doing a global history of cotton, and he does a relatively good job of convincing the reader of cotton's importance to the genesis of capitalism. But I think saying capitalism's origins are rooted in one commodity is too simplistic. He also brings up some very radical ideas about the violence involved in the origins of capitalism, but doesn't cite black historians who'd been writing similar ideas since the early 20th century, like W.E.B. Du Bois, C.L.R. James, and most relevant to this topic, the Trinidadian economic historian Eric Williams. So, overall, it's well written and well researched, but has some flaws. The next book I finished, I contemplated not putting on this list because it reveals some personal stuff, but I decided to include it because it might help some people out there. That book is Responsible Drinking: A Moderation Management Approach to Problem Drinkers by Frederick Rotgers, Mark E. Kern, and Rudy Holtzel. A quick content warning: this section will be discussing, well, problem drinking. Before I talk about the book itself, I just want to allay any potential concerns. I've never been someone who drinks every day. In fact, I generally restrict my drinking to the weekend, but like a lot of people, I do tend to lean on alcohol as an emotional crutch. And it's not healthy for me, and I don't want to do it anymore. So I decided to read this book to try to, you know, counteract that mentality. And so my case isn't as severe as many described in this book, but I still found it very helpful, and I think it would be very helpful for anyone whose problem is more moderate. I can't really speak to its effectiveness for people with more severe cases, but I will take a moment here to say if you're drinking 5 or more drinks a day and are looking to stop doing that, consult a physician. Don't get a book and try to do it on your own, because unlike some other drugs, if you're severely addicted and stop drinking cold turkey, the withdrawal symptoms can potentially kill you. So, if you're drinking about 5 or more alcoholic beverages a day, don't read this book. Talk to a doctor. Also, general thing, if you're unsure if your drinking is severe or just concerned about your health, talk to a doctor. You can never be too careful. I'm also going to include a link to help.org in the description, which is a general addiction resources website, in case anybody watching this thinks they might need it. For the next book, we're going to be moving to a much lighter topic: murder. Specifically, a Hercule Poirot mystery. The Hollow by Agatha Christie. I have read a few Christie books and enjoyed them all to varying degrees. I think this one lands somewhere in the middle for me. The build-up is very good, but you don't get as much Poirot as I'd like. He doesn't show up until about 80 pages into this 230-page book, and once he's arrived, he's not as central as he is in other mysteries. Also, without giving too much away, I didn't like the ending initially, but it's grown on me a bit. I'm still not super enthused on who the killer was, but I think I get Christie's reasoning a bit more now that I have had some time away from it. Overall, it's a fun, cozy mystery novel. Nothing earth-shattering, but very enjoyable. Next is the second issue of the now Ignatz Award-winning comics anthology series X-Mag from Piao Press. Every issue is themed around a particular genre, and this was paranormal romance. This is probably the best comics anthology I've read in a while. I enjoyed all of the entries with the exception of Leslie Hung's. I don't mean to call her out. I've enjoyed some of her previous work, but this entry encapsulated a lot of things I don't like in comics. Those of you who have seen previous wrap-up videos know I prefer comics which use words sparsely, and this is a very wordy comic. I'd also describe the art style as, for lack of a better term, very DeviantArt-esque, and I don't particularly care for that aesthetic. So this comic had a lot of hurdles to get over in order to please me, and it didn't make the jump. But let's not be too negative, because I enjoyed every other entry in here. Jane Mai and Yan Li's entries are adorably sweet. Natasha Allegri and Louis Yang's entries are extremely funny. And Loic Locatelli? I hope I pronounced that right. This entry is as terrifying as it is inventive. And then we have Michelle Kwan's entry, which is one of the best short comics I've ever read, and the only horror comic to actually scare me. I think I'm going to do a full review of this comic, so I'm not going to say too much, but it's worth getting this anthology for Kwan's comic alone, let alone all the other delightful entries. The fifth book I finished is another one I read for class, Sweetness and Power: The Place of Sugar in Modern History by Sidney W. Mintz. If you couldn't tell, I'm taking a course on the history of commodities. I liked this work a lot more than Beckert's, but I don't think it's as suited to a general audience. Mintz does a good job at showing the importance of sugar to the early development of capitalism without going too overboard. He also shows how it's linked to the rise of other commodities, specifically tea, coffee, and chocolate. It's a lot more focused, only looking at sugar's use in England and within a specific time span, roughly 1650 to 1900. This one does get bogged down in a lot of theory, which I like, but if that's not your thing, you might have a harder time getting through it. For example, a small part of this book is dedicated to discussing what meaning is. Like, the meaning of meaning. Overall, I enjoyed it and found it more compelling than Beckert, but I have a harder time recommending it to a general audience, because it is very rooted in discussing more abstract theory. But if you don't mind that, give it a go. The most recent book I finished is the masterpiece Junji Ito's Cat Diary. I can't show you my copy right now because it's currently being borrowed by a friend who you, the audience, might know as the person who steals all of my books. So I'm showing you this JPEG instead. I got way more out of it on this reread. First of all, I picked up on some references to Ito's other works, particularly Uzumaki, that I hadn't in previous readings. Also, the other times I'd read it, I hadn't yet lived with a cat, so I couldn't fully appreciate some of the antics they get into, and I also couldn't really relate to how quickly Ito becomes enamored with them. I thought I was a dog person until about a year and a half ago. And now I don't know. This is a shout out to Louie, my old roommate's cat. You're adorable and an angel. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And that wraps up September. Next video will probably be that review of Our House by Michelle Kwan, unless I suddenly decide to do something different. We'll see. But until then, like, share, subscribe, comment, all of the fun things. My name's Will. This has been Will to Read. See you next time.